everybody. I'm here with Saman. Oh, I always mispronounce her name, which is that we just talked off record now. Saman Nasir. I call her Samy. She's known as Samy too. So we are here for another Freedom to Feel conversations. And wow, that's one of my favorite thing to do. And I wonder why a lot of times I have talked to so many of my guests and Samy too. I just love this. It's a way of connecting with other humans in a deeper way and an authentic way, just being in the moment, coming from the heart. And that's what moves me. So thank you again, Samy, for being who you are and for doing what you do, being a healer. Not just a healer. I mean, a healer is almost it's almost everything to me. The word healer, it's whole in itself. But you are also a meditation coach, a certified hypnotherapist, a member of the American Hypnosis Association, instructor at the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, and a speaker. So today we'll be talking about, of course, the themes of the freedom to feel, but also about narcissism and how it can affect us, all of us, not just the ones who are unaware, even if that they are displaying some of those traits, but also those who are in contact with them. So to get this started today, talk to me for a moment, Samy, about the inspiration to become the person that you are today and to do what you do.
Well, Valeria, when I saw, even as a kid, the potential that we have for what we can feel and how much we can grow and the kind of thoughts that we can have. And I think that comes from being left alone a lot. So my parents were extremely busy and they didn't have a lot of time to connect or to ask me about my day. So because of that, I had nothing to do but be alone with my thoughts. So that can be a very terrifying experience when you don't know what to do with your thoughts. So I thought, well, I have to somehow find a way to channel them. I have to somehow think there's more to it than this because I need that right now for survival. I remember having these thoughts as some of my earliest thoughts, even as a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old. And I came to really understand that we can either make this a very terrifying experience, either life can be a very terrifying experience, or it could be all about growth and exploration and getting to know ourselves. And when we know ourselves, we can have access to so much that we never thought was possible. And that discovery was very exciting for me. And, you know, of course, that led me to wonder, does everyone think this way? You know, because other people seem to be doing so much else, like they're playing sports, they're doing all these other things. And I'm just here. So I think that really brought me into the very present moment and got me to really explore what life was about. Because of that, I think I put a lot of emphasis on internal growth, personal growth. And then, you know, as a grown-up, I thought, how can I spread this? How can I help other people discover what I've discovered, how our thoughts can be channeled, how we can be a witness to our thoughts. And there was just so much wisdom, and I felt like I had to share it.
Yeah, I love that. It's almost like I have to, in a sense of not having a choice. It just
like a purpose.
Right. How beautiful. Thank you so much again for doing what you do. I have a deep appreciation for healers or anyone trying to help themselves and others at the same time. I say that all the time because it always feels true. So I have to say it again. And so the two main questions that I usually begin with for these conversations is about the meaning of freedom. What is freedom to you? And when it comes to feelings and emotions, of course. And then how can we access this freedom? How can we maintain it? And how can we integrate this freedom per se?
Well, freedom can have so many different connotations, can be described in millions of different ways. But I believe underneath all of it, freedom is the ability to know that you will be forgiven no matter what. Yeah. So if let's say we're doing this interview, right? And you know, later on I'm going to have nagging thoughts about the way that I look or what I said or what I could have said differently or how my relationship could be better. And all these nagging, persistent thought that our brains seems to be so good at, right? Because that's how it maintains control. If we can have freedom for that and say, doesn't matter what the thought, I'll be able
Mm,
to get over it. I'll
mm,
be able to forgive myself. I'll be able to forgive others. I'll be able to have
mm,
compassion.
mm.
I mean, there is no bigger freedom than that, right? Knowing
Oh,
every moment can be a fresh start, no matter what
ah,
the mistake.
I love that. And is this something that it's a practice, Sammy, or this is something that we actually get to realize and apply every moment of the day?
In that sense, circumstances can be very discriminatory. And what I mean by that is when we are born into a home where there's secure form of attachment, there is
Mm,
this kind of forgiveness. This kind of forgiveness is modeled for children. Then it's
yeah,
a gift. It's like somebody gave them a gift because that's all they know. And that's the
right,
only way they know how to behave.
right, right.
And they're just naturally more present because
Yeah.
there's no danger to run from. They've internalized this kind of behavior, this
Mm,
kind of upbringing. But
mm,
unfortunately, when you have trauma and you have caretakers that have said one thing but done another, they have unnecessarily
mm,
punished you, you didn't know
mm.
what you were going to be punished for, then you learn to be very guarded. And that's the opposite of this freedom. So I believe it's trauma that takes away that freedom. And then later on,
Mm,
by not healing it or not addressing it, we allow
mm.
it to perpetuate.
Oh, wow. So true. So trauma. And this is exactly the work you do. Do you work mostly with trauma or other kinds of issues?
I usually find that once I'm working on any issue that has an emotional component,
Yeah.
there's always some sort of micro trauma,
Mm,
if not a big trauma,
yeah.
involved. And we usually find it. It could have been a moment of judgment, could have been a moment of shame, it could have been self inflicted trauma. It could have been
Ah,
trauma because brain, for example, didn't fully develop because let's say there was drug use from the mother while she was pregnant or something
yeah.
like that. And even though later on their life was not as traumatic, they still have that physical trauma that happened to them, prenatal trauma.
Yeah.
So we'll find if we look hard enough, trauma is usually the culprit.
So there's always trauma. And speaking of trauma, this might be a good time to begin a conversation about narcissism and how we can become traumatized by being in contact with them. But I wanted to ask you a basic question. I love these open questions so we can understand what we are talking about really more precisely. What is the difference between narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder? Is there a difference?
Yes, there is. Personality disorders are clusters of personalities as defined by the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is, created to have very precise criteria. So we can
Yeah.
say, okay, yes, you fit here, and you don't fit here. And there's, you either have to match this and this criteria, or you have to match this.
Right.
Narcissism in general, how we define it, may not exactly fit in that, but it may be more about the traits that are displayed.
Yeah.
Or it might be, uh, you might say that, Sammy, you don't have narcissistic personality disorder because you don't match this criteria from the list A and this from C. But in this relationship, you displayed very
Mm,
narcissistic tendencies. So you were
uh,
very narcissistic in this relationship. It's not a disorder. Maybe that partner brought out something in me, maybe something I always repressed or felt like,
yeah.
oh, who's going to listen to me? Who's going to care about me? So I kept it very hidden and I was very timid. But then I felt really, really loved in a certain relationship. But because I'm not used to love, that turned into
Ah,
anger. And I felt like I could abuse this partner or I could take advantage of
mm,
them. And suddenly, very hedonistic tendencies came out of me. I would have
right.
been being narcissistic in that relationship, but I wouldn't have that disorder because it wouldn't come up
Ah,
every day.
so it's very different. So those who have narcissistic personality disorder, are they born with it, or this is something that develops in childhood?
Yeah, so I believe a little bit could be genetic, but this is definitely something that's developed through
Uh,
neglect and abuse. Narcissistic
uh,
personality disorder can't really exist without
mm,
not being made
mm,
to feel important. When we were little, a lot of times
ah,
people are like, oh, you must have been overly loved or overly
yeah,
mothered or told you were the center of the universe. I don't believe that's it,
yeah.
and that's not what I see in my cases. I
Mm,
usually see that it's somebody that was neglected, somebody that gave up on other people and
ah,
couldn't really develop that empathy because they thought other people are terrible. They're out to hurt me. So from now
yeah.
on, that's what I'm going to do to them. And that's usually how it develops, is extreme neglect, abuse, or something that gets internalized as neglect at the very least.
That is so sad, isn't it? Because it seems like most of us have gone through some form of abuse. I have myself, and from what I see, those who are abused, they tend to abuse others. I heard somebody say, one of my guests, hurt people hurt people. So it's almost like automatically, right, Samy? We just develop these dysfunctional behaviors. It's really, really sad, but it's the human condition, and this is not something that we are not to say that's right or wrong. I really don't. I tend not to do that because I have been through a lot, and I talk to so many people, and I am around a lot of people who have been through a lot, still going through a lot, and I know how challenging it is to really develop this healthy mind, to go back to what we are meant to be, healthy human beings. And as I was talking to you off record, one of the ways that I see mental health in general, of course, because I come from a spiritual background per se, or a spiritual place, so I see anything that has to do with thinking, distorted thinking, confusion, it's connected to this lack of awareness of our interconnectedness, that everything's connected, that we are, I don't say one because we're so diverse, everybody's so different, but one with life per se. So I would love to hear from you about this concept or this idea that mental health has to do, or the lack of mental health, or being healthy mentally, has to do with not being aware of our interconnectedness.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and you could see exactly how that relates to trauma, right? If we're already born depending on others for survival, and we assume that's the dynamic, we assume that we're going to cry and somebody's going to come and take care of us. We assume that if we're, fidgety, somebody's going to come and check our diaper. If we're literally wired to be that way, then we already come into this world believing in interconnectedness, believing in that dynamic. So somebody has to hurt us. Yeah. Somebody has to take that away from us to make us realize otherwise, because that is not how we come into the world assuming. We come into the world assuming I'm going to be loved and taken care of, because look at me. I can't take care of myself. I can't do anything for myself. So again, this all comes back to trauma. Somebody would have to show you that, hey, you cannot depend on others. Others can't depend on you. You're not worthy of love. Therefore, why should you give love to others? Every personality disorder, and especially narcissistic personality disorder, is the result of a survival mechanism that worked at one time. It worked to keep you alive. It worked to keep you safe. And that's why it's there. It's, there's all these quote unquote negative traits, but they're really just all about what worked for us at one time. So if I needed love as a child and I did not get it, and I was made to feel unimportant, inadequate, then at the time, my defense mechanism would be to shut off all feeling and not feel any empathy, because feeling empathy would feel way too painful, especially when my needs are not being met. As a 3-year-old, as a 4-year-old, if I'm neglected and abused and I have to fend for myself, how as an adult would I even begin to separate the layers of how I learned to survive versus being a good person now? It wouldn't even occur to me, right? So those behaviors harden as a result of extreme trauma or extreme circumstances I didn't know how to deal with. So I developed this personality disorder, for instance, as a way to protect myself. Even being confused, like you said, like going through life and being kind of confused, being out of it a little bit. That's also a trauma response. That's also not how we're, wired to be. We're wired to have so many functions and of the brain and firing at all cylinders. But when we realize, hey, my needs are not going to be met, one of the things we learn to do is disassociate from the present moment. Learn to not have any needs, learn to not have any thoughts. So when something is coming at us later in school and we really want to learn, we're not going to be able to, because disassociation was our survival mechanism. That's how we disconnected from our body, our mind, from the present moment. So any disorder, no matter how you slice it, is a result of something that was originally meant to be a survival mechanism, but is now dysfunctional because it's no longer relevant. Because now you may have a loving relationship and you might ask yourself, why am I repeating those patterns? Why do I feel unloved when this person clearly loves me? It's because you have a programming in there that says you cannot be loved. That's what you had to assume at the time to get through life, to understand and make sense of things. So now that programming is there running independently of what happens outside. Right. And what we're doing through our personality disorders or through our lenses, we're looking out and seeing, let me see what experience matches what I already believe. We're not looking for new experiences. We're not looking to have our beliefs changed. We're filtering out those experiences that match how we already believe. And that's how it kind of becomes an echo chamber of existence where the same things are being echoed. We're hearing the same things over and over because we're filtering them out. We're neglecting to see other evidence. That's why healing from narcissistic abuse is so important, because it can really convince us, even though it may not even have happened in childhood. Sometimes it could have happened in adulthood. We start to believe it, and we start to come from this place of, I cannot love again and no one can love me because I've had to believe that in order to survive this relationship.
Wow. The more I hear you, it's like, it's very sad, because it has to do with something that you just mentioned so beautifully and clearly, is that we have learned not to feel safe, not to feel loved. It's like we come into this world as a ball of love, and then we just lose track of that. So it goes back to that feeling loved. So we don't feel loved. That's what we don't even know what that is. Most of us, even though we are love. That is, it's such a powerful topic to contemplate, because it's very sad, because the truth is we are love. In a sense of we are all connected. Life is utterly supportive. I mean, it's the most beautiful thing if we will really, really pay attention to it. But because of programming, as you said, in trauma, we just become disconnected with reality, with this beautiful underlying essence reality. So the question that came to me is about, today are narcissists in general and people with narcissistic personality disorders, are they aware of these traits, of the way they are behaving? How can they become aware of it? Because they don't listen to other people anyway. They have learned to block themselves, right, emotionally. So I would love to hear a little bit more about that, almost coming from a hope place, although I don't like to hope, but more trying to clarify, because I think we all have had or have some experiences with narcissism or narcissistic people.
Yes, it's very difficult. I'll be very honest with you. It's very difficult for a narcissist to see that about themselves, because their whole existence is kind of based on not seeing any flaw in themselves. The whole reason they put up this defense of I'm so important and I'm so special is because at one time it was so painful for them to see that they're not, that they're abused, that they're cast aside. So in order to tell themselves that they matter, they had to consciously overdevelop the sense of I'm important, I can do no wrong. So to get them to see that, hey, you're doing all these terrible things, right? They would have to face a lot of pain that they are determined not to see, pain that their entire personality is built around not having to see. Now, this is kind of why many times in my article, in my courses that I teach, I put, do not believe when a narcissist tells you this, do not. And the reason I stress that so much is because, again, it takes a lot for a narcissist to realize what I'm doing, because in their mind, they're not doing anything wrong. But there are exceptions to that. I'm not saying, it's impossible. I'm just saying usually that's not the case statistically. But there are things that can make a narcissist change. They would have to lose something very important. They'd have to have a huge loss or a huge crisis and realize this is not working. Even though I'm pretending for so many years this is working for me, even though going from person to person and leeching off of people and leeching off of their love and their money and sex and all of that has gotten me this far. Now it's too painful. that's what would cause them to finally be like, okay, I need to get help. They don't know it's for narcissism usually. They think
Right.
it's, something else.
Right.
So they go to a therapist, and that's, when they start to get diagnosed. And if the therapist is a good therapist, they're not going to flat out just say that and push them.
Yeah. Right.
They're going to
Yeah.
help them a little bit at a time and not just slap them with a diagnosis.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is how they would realize, but they'd have to have, I've had people in their 50s come to me and be like, none of my kids talk to me anymore. I used to be the most important guy in my household, in my family, right? The most trusted. And now 6 kids and none of them talk to me. Am I doing something wrong? And I'm like, aha, this is the beautiful moment where you're going to have such deep growth, because you're going to, through the work that we're going to do, we're going to develop things that were underdeveloped: empathy, compassion, connection with others. Vulnerability is key, because the narcissist cannot feel vulnerable. That's how they felt the most pain in their life originally, was through vulnerability. So they're like, never again. I will never allow another human being to see me. So this is some of the things that we have to do. It's not easy. A narcissist has to be very committed. And I hate using that term, like you, Valeria. I don't like to use such hard defined terms.
Yeah.
But it helps us cognitively to be able to talk about it, avoid confusion.
Yeah, true.
That's why we have these distinctions. But yes, they can. It just takes a lot for them to get to that stage where they're ready.
Wow. And suffering would be the catalyst. And it's interesting that suffering has been the catalyst for a lot of beautiful moments of transformation, of change. And I often wonder why we have to go to that place of deep pain in order to grow, in order to realize these things. Love. Well, it might be the way that life become compassionate, isn't it? It seems to me that that's the way that life shows compassion, through suffering. Unfortunately, I mean, it is not even unfortunately. It is what it is, isn't it? In the sense of life just doing what it does, kind of waking us up and doing whatever it takes to elevate our consciousness. There's something that the article that you sent me, that you have written, which is, the title is Tricks That Narcissists.
Yes, sorry, Tricks That the Narcissists Use.
Yes, yeah. So you talk about 2 types of narcissism: grandiose narcissism and vulnerable narcissism. So I'd love to know the distinction between them, Samy.
So I'll just give you a demonstration of what it would be like to encounter one versus encounter the other. So if I'm a vulnerable or narcissist, and let's say you say something to me, you say, Samy, the interview date was for this day, but you never showed up, for example. A vulnerable narcissist is just going to smooth and appease and just say, oh, Valerie, I'm so sorry, But deep inside, I'm going to internalize it as, she's just like everybody else, right? No one understands me. And I would make it all about me, right? And I would take that as criticism. So deep inside, I'm still displaying narcissistic tendencies, because I'm not relating. I'm not connecting to what you're saying. I'm disconnected from it. Everything's an attack to me. But I appear a little bit more soothing and appeasing, right? But my mental process is still saying, I'm special, and how dare you? Right? How dare you criticize me or point out any flaw? Versus more of an overt kind of narcissism, the grandiose type of narcissism is like, I don't care. I'm just going to go off, and I'm just going to say, how dare you? And I'm just going to, make you feel bad, right? Make you feel guilty, or make you feel terrible about yourself. Whatever in the moment helps me look like more superior to you. That would be more of the grandiose narcissism.
Right. That's interesting, because I see that characteristic being displayed in some people around me. And it's really a tough one to talk to them about it. You can't really, because they don't listen. And then it gets worse, actually, if you try to talk to them. What do you suggest, Samy? I know in the article you talk about actually doing whatever it takes to leave them, because we are setting us up to, trauma. So what is the best way to deal with a narcissist when we are already deep into that relationship?
Well, a narcissist is going to do what it takes to win. So, really, technically, the only way to survive them is to just let them have all the wins they want. So,
Ah,
for example, if you're sitting doing nothing, let's say you were working from home and you're on your Zoom call, a narcissist comes in and be like, I told you to do this and you didn't do this. And
yeah.
you know for sure that they haven't told you anything. You just have to let them win. It gets exhausting for the person that's in a relationship
Mm,
with them because they're not going to back down. Right. And of
ah,
course, everybody's on a spectrum. I'm talking about more of an extreme case to make a point,
yeah.
but that's what it's like living. You just have to appease and smooth. And for the person that's doing all that work, it becomes so exhausting and they feel very depleted. That's why partners of narcissists will tell you, I have nothing left. I have no love to give now. I
Mm,
don't want to be in another relationship because I wouldn't have any of myself to give to another person
wow.
because they feel like everything's been taken away from them. Because to live in that kind of environment over an extended period of time is terrible. There's no connection. There's no love. There's no feeling of mutual soothing or co-regulation
Mm,
or
mm,
partnership.
yeah.
So if
Mm,
you're deep in that relationship and you can't leave, then you just have to de-escalate. Always be de-escalating. And in my courses, I do teach some de-escalation strategies, but I really intend for them to be very short term. And, please don't do that to yourself long term because it
yeah.
will break your spirit.
That makes a lot of sense. And so for those who are in non-romantic relationships, but what about those with parents that are narcissistic? Because now we are children, we can't do much, we can't leave them, so we have to endure all that suffering. Um, do usually children from narcissistic parents become narcissistic as well?
Yes, there's a couple of ways that can turn out. One, if they felt like they had any say at all, like for example, if they had very narcissistic parents, but around the age of 7 or 8, other family members are stepping in and going, "Hey, leave the kid alone, don't do that," and they know they're supported, then they become narcissistic because they will secretly
Uh,
idolize
yeah.
their narcissistic parent, and they'll say they have all the power in the house. I want to be like
Mm,
that, so they
right.
can
Right.
become like that. But in households where there's no one to protect you, no one to defend you, and you're at the mercy of the narcissist, you're more than likely going to become like a people pleaser. And
Ah.
you're going to internalize a lot of guilt. And it's going to be very easy for later on
Mm,
a narcissist to step in and make you feel like, oh, you need to do this for me because you didn't show up.
mm,
And
mm.
they will tend to please and appease and give anything and everything. I mean, I know men that
Wow.
are leaving 12, 16-year marriages and they come to me and they're like, where did I go wrong? I gave her everything. And I'm like, that's
Yeah.
exactly it. You didn't set a boundary. So
Ah,
if we're already grown
wow.
up and we have narcissistic parents and we know we need to take care of them, we can't obviously abandon our parents. One of the things we can do is set some boundaries. Hey, dad, I'm here. I'm going to care for you. I'm going to stay with you, for 2 days since you can't, go to the bathroom by yourself. But if you keep yelling at me or keep throwing things at me, I'm going to have to step out. And I don't want you to have to be alone. Okay. And you can really, because at that age, it's harder for them to change. So you can really set a
Yeah.
boundary and tell them, hey, I'm going to do this if you don't do this. But we can still be kind. We can still be gentle. But setting a boundary is one of the kindest thing we can do for
Ah,
them, right? Because then they will have to consider other people. And considering other people is one of the most beautiful gifts we can give ourselves, right?
yeah.
Because being
Yeah.
interconnected is
Yeah.
exactly the gift that you're talking
Yeah.
about. What this
Yeah.
podcast is all about is being
Yeah.
able to really see that the true joy
Yeah.
comes from being able to consider others in addition to
Yeah.
yourself.
Right.
And narcissists don't have that. So perhaps that's one of the things we can give them as their children. Maybe that's
Mm.
why they were meant to have us, so we can show them there's
Ah.
a different way, right? There
Oh,
is
wow.
a world of empathy.
I love that too, because now, yeah, I love what you said because that makes sense. Life is very supportive of itself, so it's almost matching, trying to balance, right, Sam, in a way like nature does. It
Yes.
balances everything to make it happen, to make it beautiful. Wow, I love that. There's and then the article also you have a lot of the characteristics, so the signs. You have been already talking about some of them. There was one that you called, kind of made me laugh for some reason. Love bomb. I never heard it that way, but so I would love to hear about some of them. There are lots of them, but 9, 10 of them, 10 signs. And the first one is a love bomb, but you can talk about any of them. There are so many that I see that has to do with excessive. You use the word excessive a lot, exaggeration. So it's always, it's almost like going out of balance one way. So there's just one lane, one way of doing things. They don't know how to go back and forth or the middle way. So yeah, talk to me about the love bomb, but the first one, and then all the others. Well, there are 10 of them that you listed.
Yeah, I want people to be able to recognize narcissism. So the love bombing, plain and simple. The reason why I love to first talk about the love bombing, because that's one way people can easily see narcissists right away, right? Before they get into a relationship. You talked about, or we both talked about how hard it is to leave a relationship once you're already in deep with a narcissist. So why not catch the signs early? That's why I tell you, the kind of love that they're going to make you feel initially usually is not going to be just like a normal kind of love, right? It's going to be love bombing. It's going to be a lot of like affection and a lot of, oh my God, Valerie, I don't know anyone like you. I've never met anyone like you. You're so special. And, you know, there's like a lot of flattery. Basically, imagine how you would have always wanted to feel about yourself as a human being, right?
What a trap.
You want to feel special, right? And they are very good at giving you that. They will give you so many compliments. They'll tell you that, you know, the most amazing things about yourself. They will want to spend all their time with you. You'll just leave them after a date and they'll send you like a text saying, I miss you already. And really, they just make sure that you're enamored with them. That's the love bombing stage.
Right. Wow.
And that's where we can be really careful, and we can really say, how come they're so good at this? Maybe they've done this before a few times.
Right.
So we have to question that. I'm not saying that, you know, you're not allowed to get carried away in the moment. All of that is fine. But, you know, keeping our wits about us early can really help us save a lot of trouble later on. So that's one of the signs to watch out for. Because people with secure attachment are people that are not narcissistic or don't have that extreme need for validation themselves, are going to be like, well, I just met you. I don't know that much about you. How can I tell that you're the most special person that's ever walked the earth, right? So that's how you know the secure attachment. But unfortunately, a lot of people are attracted to narcissists because when they find somebody with a secure attachment, they're like, there's not that much chemistry. Well, chemistry has to build over time. That's how secure attachment is. Right. So that's one of the things I talked about. Then there was obviously the self-importance. They really want to feel like they're very special and unique. And, you know, they'll fantasize. They'll have these fantasies of like high status, like big cars, you know, having everything that the way they want. They get very angry when they can't get that or somebody stops them from doing that. So you might have had this experience even in school. We could see bullies usually are narcissistic, by the way. If they don't get their way, they get very angry because they feel very entitled, right, to that. So that's another way to tell a narcissist. They love praise. They love to be admired, right? And they need it constantly. So in the beginning of a relationship, if they're giving you all of that love bombing, you're going to give them attention and love in return. They're going to get bored of it. Even though they want it so badly, after a month or two, they're going to crave that from someone else. So they're sometimes will be fishing for it. They'll be looking for new partners. You'll see them constantly liking, you know, the opposite sex on Instagram, like pictures, so they can get likes back. And one of the perhaps the most dangerous thing about a narcissist is they don't feel any remorse. They don't have, they're cut off from the empathetic part of them. So if someone was displaying all these traits, but also felt empathy for other people, I would not be able to call them narcissistic. That is one of the key distinctions, is that they do not feel any empathy.
So what is the difference between a psychopath and a narcissist?
So a narcissist will have psychopathic tendencies, and a psychopath will have narcissistic tendencies. But I think the biggest distinction for me is that a narcissist still does things because they want to look good. They want it to come back to them. They do it for importance, or they do it something to do with their ego. Psychopaths do it without even really relating back to how it helps them. So let's say in this moment I come over to you and I mess up your hair, right?
Oh gosh, don't do that, Samy.
If I do that, there would be two different reasons I did that. If I'm a psychopath, I just did that because I feel like it and I feel no remorse, and I just absolutely don't care, and it's something to do. Versus a narcissist would have done it more thought out. If I mess up Valeria's hair, then my hair looks better in comparison. Then everybody will be looking at me. A psychopath doesn't necessarily do that for that reason. They're just like, I don't know why, I was bored. They could never explain to you why they did the things they did.
Wow.
So that's the biggest thing.
Wow, that's very well explained, because I often wonder, and I think I have asked before some people that I interviewed about narcissism, but the difference, but you say it clearly. So psychopaths, they have no awareness whatsoever. They have no idea why they do the things they do. So that's so would you say that psychopaths, they cannot recover, they cannot heal, and narcissists can?
Yes, I think, I hate to say this because it may not be the case in all cases, but with psychopaths, we usually find damage to the prefrontal cortex. So with psychopaths, we might actually find, you know how you asked about narcissism and how if they're born like that? With psychopaths, I would say more than anything, there is a lot of times some damage to certain lobes, frontal lobes in the brain. And because of that, it's a little bit more difficult.
Okay. So
because those parts of the brain are not fully functioning.
So the brains are different. That's there's a difference with the physical brain. So something's happening there, right? That makes so much sense. So you were actually talking about the signs, and there are so many of them. Let me see if there's one in particular that caught my attention, Samy. You say interpersonal relationships with narcissists are marked by high levels of conflict. So that kind of, it's a very good sign, isn't it? When we are fighting with our partners all the time, there's too much conflict.
Oh, yes. And you'll see this roller coaster kind of relationship that they go through and they put their partners through. So these are the type of couples that you'll see that, you guys are all getting together and they're getting drunk and they're fighting and they're throwing things at each other and the guy's getting really upset. But then 2 days later, you see them and they're like, oh yeah, we're flying off to Paris. And because it's like, there's a lot of drama. There's a lot of conflict. One moment they feel really good. If you said the right thing, they're willing to, spend all this money on you and just like take you anywhere you want to go and all of this. But the second you mess up, suddenly there's now like no love for you. Now they hate you, right? And they want a divorce. I was working with a client whose wife said, I want to get another house with you. Let's rent a house, or let's buy a house and rent it out. Let's make money. Let's do this business together. And 3 months later, she was like, I'm pregnant with another guy's baby. I mean, you could see how there's no regard for your partner or partners. Right. There's no like, oh, this action might hurt this person. Maybe I should think of, there's none of that. It's so conflict driven because they don't consider anybody's needs. They're not capable of it. Usually they don't have the tools to really feel another human being's emotions. So you'll see this conflict. You'll see one moment they feel so good and they love you, and the next moment they hate you and want a divorce or want to punish you or want you to pay for what you did to them, even if it's something really small, like you forgot to make them coffee in the morning. They can take that as a slight and be like, you didn't make me coffee, Valeria. Like, you're on my bad list now. Those are the type of relationships you see.
Wow. That's really amazing. I remember not wanting to talk about these topics. Every time I did on the podcast, like the audio one, I would get very uneasy. And I think it's because it has to do with my relationship with my mother. I talked to you off record about this too. She displayed some of these traits, these signs. And it would bring like these feelings in me, like almost of anger, of uneasiness. My chest would just tighten up. That's interesting to see that now, hearing your talk, reading the article and listening to you, those feelings don't come up anymore. Even if I was brought up with a narcissist and developed a lot of issues because of it, now it feels more it feels, it's almost like it's a flow thing. I just let it pass. It came, I mean, I felt something at some point listening to you, but then it just went away. So do people who have, do people like myself, it seems like I'm one of them, victims of, I wouldn't say victim, I have a hard time using that word too, but who have been hurt by this kind of relationship. Do they recover fully? Have you had that experience as a healer, as a therapist?
Yes, in fact, if the healing can happen, if somebody's willing to sit through what it takes to process all of that grief, like in your case, Valeria, you've done a lot of work, right? You can't just expect to step out of something like this and say, oh, I should be fully recovered. I should have this beautiful flash of insight. I should be recovered. That's almost like breaking a bone and saying, why am I not healed? You know, it's already been 3 days. Why is my bone not, right? It's the same way. We have to give it its due time. So the times you used to be uncomfortable with it, it's probably because you may have skipped the grieving process and went straight from pain and abuse to spirituality and acceptance. Which is great. It's great. I feel like people should do that. But at the same time, that chunk of thing that you missed, that grieving that the little girl in you needed to do was like, what about me? So she was actually, the little girl in you was the one getting uncomfortable. But the adult in you is like, I'm at this beautiful place. I feel very serene. But if we fully also grieve it, which you have, I can tell, done a little bit more of more recently, then you can really, really start to integrate all of the information. Once you do that, I would even go as far as to say, then you're almost better off than someone that's never seen it, because you're wiser, you have more wisdom, you see things more comprehensively, and most of all, you're able to connect and know others' pain. Versus if you had not experienced it, let's say you never experienced it, yes, you wouldn't have gotten through all that pain. But if I ever came to you and I said, hey, this, and this happened to me, you wouldn't be able to relate to me. You'd be like, well, sounds like you're fine now, so why not get over it? Right? And you would lack that ability. So I believe that healing from it is great, and it leaves you with these beautiful traits, more wisdom, more clarity, and you're able to see more people's point of view.
That's great to know when I think about it, because when I think about life, I do think about going through everything, not bypassing anything, especially feelings, those strong feelings. So that could happen too, right, Samy, that we try to bypass it, like I believe I did many years ago, by going into spirituality. So I was desperate to find a way out of that pain. And I just immersed myself into all kinds of out there belief systems. Now, it has changed. It has become a lot more integrated, as you call it. I love that word too. And then it's almost like, I call it a dance, just seeing all the behaviors. It's very diverse. And I'm able to do that now. Of course, before I would get worked up about everything. But then now I just see it as, not that I don't feel like upset sometimes. Instead, for me, it's more sadness. Sadness sets in every time I see that disconnection in human beings, not loving themselves, loving others. Then I become sad. And then I wonder if that is part of that grief. Am I still grieving, or this is a natural way of interacting with this reality? Because once we know what the per se truth is, that we're all connected, then it's, I can't, it's almost impossible not to be sad when I see that in other people.
Yes. And so there's still some grieving left to do. But what I'd like to mention here, Valeria, is what I'm picking up on is that sadness to you, out of all the emotions that you did feel or could have felt as a result of what happened, sadness was the most acceptable to you personally, based on your belief system. You were like, I'd rather feel sad than angry. So even now, as you're thinking about some of the stuff, you're like, no, anger, that's an ugly emotion. I'm going to feel that. So I'll feel sad, and you're not fully processing maybe the anger. You're trying to channel it into sadness because you feel like, well, with sadness, at least it's more useful. Maybe I'll be able to help others. Maybe I'll be able to realize something. Anger is just, it's useless and it doesn't serve me. But anger is part of the conscious being that you are. It's part of consciousness in general.
Right.
And what can happen as a result of not allowing that anger to be rightfully there and kind of sitting through it, breathing through it, allowing it and accepting it, actually allows you to have access to a lot more things, more vitality, more of that life force. Because disconnecting from it can be detrimental physically, emotionally as well. But I believe that's why you feel usually mostly sadness, is because
it's almost like being more acceptable, right? A kind of is more subtle.
Growing up too in your household, that might have been more acceptable. If you were sad, nobody would have bothered you. But if you got angry, you might have been punished for it.
Oh, yeah, that makes so much sense. Yes, of course. I just, in a way, because I let all the feelings to come and go, I try not to hold on to too many of the concepts. I try not to kind of dig too much into them. It's a feeling, and I get to feel them. So yeah, sometimes I do. I don't call it anger, because I see anger almost as has fire in it. It's a very powerful, energetic emotion. I don't think it's a feeling. Would you say it's a feeling, Samy? It seems like it's an emotion, because now it's a mental concept. We call it anger, but it's really it's a feeling that, to me, when I don't feel it these days, but felt it like it was fire burning the stomach and the chest. There's some burning to do with that. I think. I mean, that has been my experience, but I wonder if you can, elaborate a little bit more on that.
Well, feelings and emotions get used interchangeably in normal English language. I feel angry. I'm experiencing an anger emotion. But in psychology, we make the distinction that emotion is more in the body. Again, in your case, I would say you feel it more as an emotion rather than a feeling, because again, feeling would be in the mind, and the mind is where you have learned to exercise great control without realizing, but just with your spiritual practices and sitting with emotions, you can channel it. Versus in the body, it still exists in its raw form. So you experience it more there because it's not as acceptable for you. Somewhere in there is a feeling of, it's not okay, I have to reframe it, or I'll sit with it. But there's a connotation of, hopefully it will go away if I sit with it long enough, if I do these spiritual practices. So maybe that's why you're not feeling it as much, but you're definitely having the experience of it, because the body, you can't fool the body. You can't lie. You can't think your way out of it.
So true. So true. So basically you're saying that we there's no destination when it comes to feelings and emotions. We will always have them. So even if we consider ourselves to be let's say balanced or healed, whatever label we call it, or enlightened, there is always room for feelings, right, Samy? We are here to feel. I mean, I love that idea. So I'd love to hear from you about being open to life and letting feelings and emotions just be.
Yes, absolutely. And I think in the beginning stage, when we're healing, if at that point we take ownership of our feelings and say, yes, I am angry, damn it, this bad thing happened to me. And yes, the more noble path or the better path would be to forgive and forget immediately. But no, I'm going to freaking acknowledge that this bad thing happened to me. And, hell with it. I'm going to let myself feel it. I deserve to be angry. And if we just let that happen often enough, that's a form of acceptance. That's a form of mindfulness, right? Because we're making space for what's here now. And the most beautiful thing happens, which is without trying to. We're now able to own our emotions, and now we can learn to disown them when necessary. That's the beautiful thing. So you may be like, Samy, I can do this when I'm sitting at home, but when I'm like at my in-laws, I can't just be like, damn it, I'm angry, right? So what are you telling me here? What I'm telling you is that if you do it enough, right, then in moments where you don't want it to come up, they become very manageable, because you at your core know that you're going to allow yourself to feel things ultimately. So the feelings don't try to overwhelm you. When they come up, they don't spiral you or pull you under, because they're like, oh, she's going to let me feel them later. I'll just tell her later the message that I'm trying to tell her. That's the attitude your feelings get. And then you're able to process them very quickly, very effectively. But yes, we are meant to have emotions. We always will have emotions. We should really look at them as a guidance system. They're trying to tell us something's off. Maybe we need to fix something, or we need to reframe something. Ultimately, we can get to that place. But being able to feel them is very important. Being able to acknowledge their existence and not denying them. That's one of the ways we heal.
Yeah, that's a powerful message. And one of the reasons we're having this conversation today, that it's okay to feel. It's okay, one way or another. Of course, most of us love the feeling of happiness, right? Of joy, of all the pleasure and all that. But we are here to feel everything. And I love that, being open to that. So we're almost at the end of this conversation today, but I wanted to also mention because the title of the article is about tricks, right? The narcissists use. So you outline lots of them, the tricks, the I'm sorry trick, I need you trick, I will change, I can't live without you trick. So many of them. So what are some of the most important ones to be on the lookout, Samy?
So with narcissists, let's be on the lookout for anything that sounds really, really extreme, right? So if I come to you to apologize after a breakup and I say to you, hey, listen, I will be very devastated if I lose you. And here's why. This is what you've brought into my life, and this is how I feel like I can contribute differently. That sounds like a very neutral, coming from somebody very healthy. That's acknowledging what's happening in the moment. This is a sincere apology. But if I come to you and I say, Valerie, I can't live without you. I swear to you that I will be completely destroyed. I will not do anything. I will never love again. And I make these huge claims about what's going to happen in the next 40 years of my life. Let's say I'm 40 and I'm going to live another 40 years, hopefully. And I come to you and I say, I will never love again. A non-narcissist wouldn't do that, because they'd be like, oh, that would be a lie. I don't know for sure. Right? They subconsciously know that. So they're not going to say anything. Versus a narcissist has no regard for, hey, what I'm saying, what if I can't live up to that? I shouldn't say that. They'll say really big things. I love you. I will never love another woman again. Please take me back. I 100% will change. Rather than somebody that's like, wait a minute, I don't know if I'm going to change 100%. Why should I mislead you? Right? So they'll something like, I'm definitely going to make an attempt. Here's my plan. I'm going to start doing this. I'm going to start showing you this. When you're talking, I'm not going to interrupt you. I have a whole plan. You can really tell they put thought into it. But narcissists will make very big, broad statements. And they'll make promises, huge, grandiose promises, just like they love bombed in the beginning. They're going to do that when you break up with them and they're trying to get you to take them back. Those are some of the things. But it's helpful to know the specific, the tricks that I outlined, because sometimes people are like, oh, I knew he was a narcissist, but I didn't know that thing was a trick. I didn't know when they said, I've changed and I'm more spiritual now. And, I go to church now. I didn't know that wasn't. So I outline all of them and I describe how to find them so you can spot them and know what they are.
Yeah, that they're very useful. I'll have that the link of that article I'll have on your video interview profile too, so people can click and read, because you outline everything clearly there. So I have a few more questions for you, mostly technical ones, but I wanted to ask you the question about the ending question about a message. If there's one message that you wish everyone to take with them from this conversation today, what would that be?
So if you have a very caring and compassionate nature and you like to assume the good in everyone, then be on the lookout, because that is very attractive to a narcissist. So while those traits are really great about you, in the wrong hands, they can be very, very devastating. So in order to have real freedom and liberation, right, in your life, we need to be mindful and cognizant of not setting boundaries with narcissists. So please make sure that you're setting your boundaries, because there's too much of a good thing, right? So if you are such a caring person that always wants to understand and always wants to make everything work, then really you should be paying attention to these signs.
Wow, that's a big one. Yeah, especially those people like myself, because I have to put myself in that category of always trying to see the good in everyone. And that's really what, I have learned, and I keep reinforcing in a way. So that's a good message for me too. Thank you so much, Samy. I was listening to you and like, oh my God, I have to be on the lookout for that too. So thank you so much for your presence, for everything that you represent. I love your intention to help others. It's just the most beautiful thing. Thank you so much for being you, Samy.
Thank you, Valeria.
And before we say goodbye, what's the best way to find more information about you, to learn more about what you do?
So you can go on my website, www.don'twaittolive.com. And from there, there's many ways to reach me.
Wonderful. I'll have that link here too. Thank you again, and we'll talk soon. Take good care, Samy. Bye for now.
Thank you, Valeria. Have a good day.
Oh my God. You too.